Hi, this is Olivier at Lingoport. Today, I would like to present how to onboard a Localyzer project. A quick recap about Localyzer. Developers write code, and part of the code is a certain number of files like resource files, Java files, C# files. So some of them are the application code itself, and some of them are the strings that are going to be displayed on an application, or they're going to be sent via an email, user-facing strings. In order for those user-facing strings to be translatable, they need to be created in resource files. They typically have key value pairs, like properties files, or a JSON file, or a regex file. Those files are resource files. You typically will have one file per locale for a set of strings. So maybe you have 10 files, and those are all in English. And then in order to translate it, you'll get 10 files in French, 10 files in German, and so on. So that is what developers do. They create the English files, for example, the source files, and they push them back together with the rest of the code into a repository. Very standard repositories are GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. Those are repository types. What does Localyzer do? It clones or updates the files from the repository, and it analyzes the files that need to be translated based on an onboarding that's done here in Localyzer. It will check the resource files for correctness in terms of a number of validations, including the file format, the encoding, duplicate keys, ICMSH format, and so on. If there are any errors, Localyzer will show the errors in terms of the status of the project. If they can be sent for translation, so if there are no errors, those files can be sent to a TMS or an LSP. When they are translated into target locales like French, German, Japanese, and so on, they will be retrieved by Localyzer and checked for correctness again, and against the files that were sent for translation during that round trip. If everything is correct, it will be pushed back to the repository. So developers are creating the source files, for example, in English, and Localyzer is going to automate the process to get the translation going and to be pushing back the files to the repository, the translated files back to the repository. What do you need in order to onboard a project with Localyzer? First of all, you need access to a Git repository from Localyzer. So that's typically a Git account that has read and write access to the repository and its branches. The repository and branch is going to be the key to finding files, and those files are going to be found based on their file format. So maybe they are JSON files, maybe they are properties files, maybe they are YAML files. Then the locale naming convention may be on a directory name, maybe in the file itself that needs to be translated. For example, you can have a locale naming convention that says that US English is going to be named EN, or it's going to be named EN-US, or it's going to be named EN_US, or uppercase English. Some other ways that, in terms of how the locales are named in the repository, that's up to the developers. And finally, which TMS or which LSP to send things to. So those are really easy information to find. And what we're going to do now is use a repository to kind of determine each one of those items. So let's do a quick demonstration how to get to those items. What we have here is a repository called Lingoport Public Acme, and the branch is translation. In that branch, under standard, there are different file formats for Android, iOS, JSON, properties, regex, and so on. For Android, for example, a very typical way of doing things is that under a res directory, you will have the locale indicated on a values dash, the naming of the locale here, like FR for French. Sometimes for Spanish, it may be values dash ES, for example. So here it's a two-letter code. associated with values dash. That's typical for Android. For iOS, typically you'll have a locale.lproj, maybe base.lproj for some of them, or en.lproj for others, and then the locale code like Japanese ja.lproj for translated files. Another example here for properties is having no locales on the source file and a messages underscore fr or file underscore fr.properties for French, or maybe fr underscore fr for properties in French. For regex, you may typically have something like no locale on the file name, and again, it's on the file name, not a directory, and then dot lowercase de in 2 letters, dash uppercase de in 2 letters for the typical translated files, as you expect them in the application. What we're going to do today is just onboard something that's for JSON files. So in this example, it's not on a directory that you have the locale, but it's in the files themselves. And it could be messages, it could be file underscore en.json, could be whatever you want here, but it's some file name underscore en.json for the locale for the source files, and underscore a 2-letter code typically, and can be more, for the translated files. So now that we know that, we need a way to access this repository from within Command Center. We know that there are JSON files. We know that there are en for the source locale, and then fr for French, and we will add a couple more for the target locales. So let's go on Command Center. In Command Center is here. I have already a few repositories and branches that are there. I'm going to add a project to this list. I'm going to choose one of the, so I'm going to choose an account that has access to the Acme repository. This one does, so I'll click next. I need to have the repository URL. So which repository? Here you can see that it's translated. It's Lingoport Public Acme. It's this one, and the branch is translation. So I'm just going to copy that over here, and the branch is translation. Next, there is by default the name of the project is set up. So Lingoport Public Acme translation corresponds to Lingoport Public Acme translation. However, if you decide to change that, you certainly can, and have removed the module name or have a demo or something else. I'm going to leave it as translation for now, and I'm going to add a tag. One of the tags is going to be demo, and another tag is going to be JSON, because there are JSON files that are here. I can run Globalizer or Localyzer. Here we are onboarding the Localyzer project. So the Localyzer project here, I'm going to click next. And now I need to pick which TMS or machine translation to go to. I'm just going to click Protos Enterprise for Lingoport here. So if you remember, the locale code for the source locale is en. It's not enus. And we can check that here quickly here. Messages underscore en.json. I'm going to add French here, and the French that I want is the French from France. So I'm going to just click here. And again, it's a 2-letter code that I want, not this. And I'm going to add Japanese. There we go. And again, I just want a 2-letter code as per what developers want, not what the person who wants to translate, but what developers want. I'm going to click next here. So I've decided on my locales. I have 2 locales in terms of the translation locale targets. And now I need to add resource files. So we're looking at JSON files here. This is for JSON files, and they're not just called enus.json files, which happens for some implementations. There is a file name underscore en.json. So a file name underscore the locale.json. So I'm going to look for that here. File name underscore the locale.json. The locale here is shown with enus, but it's really en that's going to be taken into account. I'm going to click next, and then Where am I going to find those? Are there many different repositories that have those and so on? I'm just going to restrict it to standard. That's all I'm going to do. But you could add as many include patterns as you want. Standard. Next. Those typically you don't need to change, but maybe you want to use a post import script or a special GitHub import message or some other things. If you just want to onboard, you just click next. This is kind of advanced. And at this point, to confirm the localizer configuration, you are checking that this is the file or files that you want translated into those files, into messages.fr.json and messages.j.json. Finally, who is going to be accessing this project? Maybe Lily and Linda are going to be accessing this project. The CC admin will always get that. If you want them to access and receive notification messages, you leave that checked in. If you don't want Lily to receive notification messages, you uncheck that box. And now you can just click the button to create the project. So now that we've created a project, if you remember, it had a demo tag. And here is the project created with the name that was associated with it by default, Onboard public, Acme translation, and the tags demo and JSON. So we can analyze the project at any point in time. If new files or new strings have been added to that project, just click run and it's already done. You can check how well translated it is at this time. And at that point, you have onboarded this project. So going over what you're seeing here, it says that the source locale is the end. There are two target locales. There's no trackback, pseudo, or context locale. There are 16 words, 6 keys, or 6 strings if you want, and 1 resource file. It is going to go to the Lingoport Trados Enterprise TMS. Nothing has been received from that TMS yet. There's nothing that's outstanding. Everything is fine. There are also no developer errors, meaning everything can be sent for translation. There is no translator error, and that's since no kits have been received, that's normal. There's no informational issue also. This report here shows you for each one of the locale, what is the percent complete? How many words have been translated out of the total number of words? Are there any words that are being translated at the moment? And are there any unsent word for that locale? You notice that in between Japanese and French, it's different. And there are 16 words that need to be sent, or all the words that need to be sent for Japanese here. If you want this translation to happen now, you click this button here. When you click that button, a project will be created automatically in this Trados Enterprise, in this TMS, and translation can happen. Later on, when the translation happens, it will automatically be retrieved and validated and pushed back to the repository if everything is fine. Okay, some other panels that you can check. The overview here, very briefly, which credentials you're using. It's GitHub O. It's a GitHub repository that you're going after, not an SVN or Bitbucket. It's going against this repository, which you can check briefly by just opening this, for example. Yeah, I'm going to the right one. And it's using this branch. And you can have a very brief report on what's happening here. You also see the project history here. So in terms of the log, if anything happens, you can check really quickly what happened on this, for example. Localyzer is the page that we saw earlier. Strings shows which strings here are to be sent, but also it can show all the strings that are contained in the resource files that need translation. So in this instance, because Japanese has not been sent for translation, it's all the strings. And you can see for each one of them here that one of the 2 locales has been translated, the other one has not been translated. And that's true for all the strings here because Japanese was not sent for translation yet. If there were any issues, you click here and you see issues, but there are no issues here. And finally, the logs that you saw earlier. At some point, there may be a lot more logs, so you'll be able to just check analysis run, for example, and have a look at the log if anything goes bad. If anything goes bad, by the way, look for error in the logs. Here, everything is fine. And finally, if you want to change something, edit here. For example, let's say that at some point you want to add a new locale. Just go here, locale settings, and let's say you want to add German, for example. Here we go, German for Germany, and you just want DE, or maybe you want DE, doesn't matter. And at that point, when source file is found, we can check here the validation for that project. If what you thought you have onboarded is right, yep, here's the messages.de. And now when I'm going to go to Localyzer after analysis, you see that this needs to be checked. You click this button, it's going to run the analysis again. It's done. And at that point, you will see that now it's 33% complete because German and Japanese need to be translated. French has been translated. So let's send things for translation. It's just for a demo here. So I'm just going to click that button. And what happens here is that it's being in the process of being sent. That's all you need to do. At that point, it's going to be handled by the TMS, by the LSP. And when it has been translated, it will be returned automatically back to Localyzer. So the difference in terms of the Localyzer reports page is you see that there is a dashed, there are striped lines here and a solid line, meaning it's not all green, meaning not everything is translated like this guy. But everything here is being sent for translation. Everything here has been sent for translation. You can see that here, outstanding words, 16 out of 16, so it's the entire bar. And you can see more precisely here that 16 words were sent for German on that date. They're expected back here. And when they'll be ready, this will disappear when everything here has been returned. There will be a kit received here. There is one outstanding kit, which is kit 1. And if everything goes well on the way back, it will be pushed back to the repository, and this will be good. That's it for the onboarding. For other resource files, it would be very similar. If I wanted to go back and see JSON, you see Android and iOS and properties and so on. If you wanted to add more to an onboarding, you could just go back to the edit. And as opposed to doing JSON files, for the resource file format, you would add maybe, let's say, properties here. And you click that and you choose the format it is. And it's this one, for example, and maybe you choose some other things here for regex and so on. So if you want to save that at that point, the properties that are handled here are going to become maybe part of this. So let's check the validation here. What we're saying is, in terms of the validation, you see that some properties that you did not expect was found. So it's always good to check that. So we're going to restrict it to standard properties here, for example. In order to do that, we're going to go back to edit. And we're going to make sure that we're checking only those include exclude patterns. So I'm going to say JSON for this one. And then I'm going to add standard /properties for the other one. And at that point, when I will rerun this again or validate it, I should only see 2 files. One that's under standard JSON for messages, one that is under standard JSON for the JSON files, and for the properties files what are under standard properties. So now what you're saying is some of the words that were in the properties files right here, there are 5 words that have not been sent, 16 words that have been sent for Japanese and German. There are 21 words altogether between the JSON file and the properties file. If I go to strings now, you'll see that there are more words that will appear to be sent. Goodbye, hello, and how are you? They are probably part of the properties files. If I expand this, you will see that they are part of the properties files. And by the way, if you want to go from Localyzer and see quickly this farewell here, you can just click here and it will take you directly to the right repo, the right branch, the right file, in the right directory, at the right location here. Farewell, goodbye. That's it for now for this quick demonstration on how to onboard and how to edit a project for Localyzer in Command Center. Thank you.